guys would ask a lot of questions towards the end, once we have clarified some of these topics, because like I do understand that like you know this is a complex topic, but yeah, as I was saying, like if you ask a lot of questions, we will be in a position where we can actually answer these things for you, and then clarify to the best of our ability possible. So yeah, I mean, like guys, don't feel shy, because we are here right now, me and Romit. So specifically, like whatever questions you have, like not now, but just think about it, and do ask as many questions as possible. And if you're not able to understand something, it's okay, like you can ask again, you can ask it in a different way, and we will definitely try and clarify it, so that you're able to get it. And because ultimately what we want you to do is be in a position where you're able to make better decisions for yourself. All right, cool. So with that, what we will be covering today is like what is money and the evolution of money, what are the properties of money, and like the need for banking, the birth of central banking, and with that, the whole concept of inflation and how that can potentially turn into like hyperinflation. And a little bit we will be talking about what are the other kind of assets that you can probably look at in terms of trying to protect yourself from this inflation or hyperinflation potentially. And like specifically, since we're talking about the concept of money, what is the role of cryptocurrencies and blockchain in this possibility to protect yourself from what is kind of around the corner, right? So, and to that end, we will be talking a bit about like what are blockchains, and the birth of Bitcoin, how that protocol works, and what is the idea behind it, and also just a few more technical details we will be covering for today. All right. Now, uh, coming to the say first thing, like on say the economics of money, right? So the first thing to really understand, uh, yeah. So yeah, this, the first thing to understand with respect to the economics of money is that like money, one way to think about it is like a store of your energy, right? Like you are putting in some amount of energy into the world in terms of like whatever work that you're doing. It's like, say you're a farmer and you're growing some potatoes, or things like that. And you would like to like have this arbitrage of energy and effort over time, like where there is a certain time frame where you're putting in energy in growing potatoes, and there might be like a future time when you want to utilize that energy in a different fashion, right? And this is like a very important aspect to understand about money, is it is this form of energetic exchange where you're able to like preserve your energy and then utilize it at a later time frame, right? And not only from a technical point of view, this is also like really important concept to understand from a psychological point of view, because if I had to like talk about like people's associations with money in general, like there are a lot of people who have like negative associations with money, and they have this idea that hey, money is evil, it's like this bad thing, it's a tool that corrupt people use, and like there are a lot of negative preconceptions about money that I have come across. But yeah, these are like baggages that we have of sorts. It's not really money itself. Like the thing itself is simply a tool that we have, right? And it's a form of energy exchange of sorts. And if you're able to understand that concept, there are many things that kind of flow from there. It's like as a natural progression of that. Now, as I was saying, like the first thing is that money is basically information of resources. Like that's what it is doing. It's a kind of a it's a data that exists. Now, by that, what I mean is like, see, if you look at historically on this whole thing of like energy exchange and value transfer, like if you think of contexts where humans were existing in places where like say you're a tribe that is living in a forest and you are just exchanging resources, and you don't really have like a form of money. Now that is where you would do something like a barter system. Now the problem with the barter system is that you're not able to keep track of this information in a very simple way. Kind of things tend to get a bit complex. But as soon as you have some standardized units, right? Now you're able to ascertain that, okay, like, say maybe you're living in some mountain jungle, of sorts. And if you're using seashells as a unit of account, where you're keeping these seashells and, okay, like I get, someone to, cut some logs of wood for me and then give it to me. Then I give them, say, 10 seashells in exchange for that. Now, and this person will then go and, maybe with one seashell, he will, get some honey from someone else. And then with another seashell, he's going to get, like just maybe some hemp rope or something like that. And so at its core, what this thing is doing is that it is conveying, or rather it is transferring, like it's a way of taking information from one place to the other. Like it's communicating that stuff. Essentially that's what it is doing, right? Now, 1 second. Yeah. Now, as I was saying, coming to the evolution of money, so the first form was barter. Now, clearly, the issue with barter is that sometimes you might have things which are non-divisible in nature. Like from this example, it's like, let's say you're like a cow herder and you want say potatoes in exchange. Maybe what you want is like maybe 10 kgs of potatoes, but now you're not really able to like divide that in a form where the cow represents, right? uh, so obviously there are some practical difficulties with this form of functioning, which is where now eventually when you kind of reach this stage of using something like a seashell, or basically anything that is like convenient and it's also scarce in nature. And this is like a very important point that I would say, like, to think about, which is scarcity. It's like it shouldn't be like something that's like totally abundant. Like you can't take like if you're in the middle of a forest, you can't take leaves and be like, hey, I will use this as a unit of account, right? So eventually the transition happened where people went from things like seashells and other scarce materials to using gold and silver as units of account or as money, right? Now, for the very first time, I think it was, I think, in Athens, or like maybe in China, or I don't know which place, basically, where some empire basically they started using like minted coins as money, right? So, and with that, what you have is a form of standardization that comes in. Like, hey, okay, now I have these coins that I can use as money, and then now I'm able to price things in these coins. Like maybe this house is worth like 20 gold coins, or maybe this you know uh, armor suit is worth like one silver coin, or thing like that, some things like that. So, and this is where for the first time, like different things in like in in the economy were priced at a monetary system of sorts. Now, obviously, it has evolved, to paper cash, plastic cards, and shitty internet banking. So we will be covering some of these concepts in a bit as well, right? So, yeah, Romit, would you want to jump in and say add anything at this point?
Yeah, sure. And maybe we could just explain how the money itself evolves. If we go back, actually, if we go back to the previous
Yeah,
slide. Yeah. So one one basic concept that you can see with the evolution of money is uh, every single time there is a shift from one monetary form to another, something has gotten better, right? Like, for example, when Vishnu explained that we went from barter to shells or gold, it basically set like one standard, right? Like gold or silver became the standard material to be traded for any other asset. So that problem was fixed. But then as people used more gold and more silver, they had to carry it in a bag which was heavy, and it's prone to being stolen from you and things like that. So they needed some form of security. They wanted to have a monetary system that is a bit more easier to use. So this is where basically concept of banking comes in, and the banks were initially supposed to be the guards, right? Like they were supposed to protect your money, because of course, if you kept it in your home, somebody could just steal it. So the banks would actually have guards, and they would protect your money, and in turn, they would actually give you a slip, like a paper receipt saying, hey, you hold this much gold or silver with us. So you would basically get like a bill that represents what your worth is in that bank. Um, so the way paper actually became money is by actually exchanging these receipts. People thought, hey, why should I go to the bank, withdraw my gold, and then pay for something? Instead, I just transfer over the paper itself, which means I'm transferring over the ownership of the gold. So what the paper cash actually back then meant was that it was backed by the gold that was in the bank. That was one of the main important things that people seem to have forgotten today, which is the paper is actually supposed to be redeemed by an actual asset. Um, of course, that became plastic and internet banking later. But yeah, so if we go to the next slide.
1 second. Yeah.
Uh, yeah, yeah. So as we saw, there are actually properties of money that can be improved, or there are certain aspects that we can look at uh, money and say that, okay, this is what is called as money, right? One of the major things that we saw across the evolution of money is the ease of being able to pay someone. So that is what is called as a medium of exchange. That is one of the main properties that whatever we call money should have. It should be very easy to exchange. It should be as frictionless as possible to transfer from one owner to another. And from this, what happens is you end up with another property called a store of value, which means you must be able to store that value over a long period of time. So, for example, if you, let's say, used milk as money, well, the milk doesn't really store itself pretty well. Like after a day or two, it gets spoiled, and then it can't be used as milk. It can be probably used as something else, but it can't be used as milk anymore. And similar to every other asset, like even paper is not really that great of store of a value, right? Because paper also goes away after some time. But the reason that gold has been used for the past 5,000 years as some sort of store of value, because it actually does store whatever you've had. Like, for example, if you have 5 grams of gold, it will remain as 5 grams of gold even after thousands of years. So this is another important aspect of the money that somebody should look into, that it should definitely store its own value. Um, so what unit of account means is there should be some sort of unit that you should be able to represent it in, right? Of course, you can say 1 cow or 1 liter of milk, but then it's really hard to, as I said, use that as money. And the way metals was used in the form of unit of account is it would be measured in the grams. So let's say 1 kg of rice could be worth 1 gram of gold, right? So that is how you would represent 1 gram of gold. And if you have, let's say, paper, let's say you have paper worth 100 rupees a note, that should be worth something in the gold. Let's say that 100 rupees itself is worth 1 gram of gold. So that 1 or 100 that is written on the note, that becomes the unit of account. So there should be some form of accounting system that we can put into in money. These are the main properties, the main three that we look at when it comes to money. But apart from that, they should also be easy to transport. As I said, gold was harder, cash was easier. So of course we see in the evolution we see uh, yeah, basically money getting lighter and lighter in a way. Plastic money is much easier to, I mean, a card for a credit card or debit card is much easier to carry than a bunch of cash in your wallet. So again, we see in the evolution that these things really matter. Um, divisibility just means that you should be able to give fractions of it. As explained in one of the previous slides, you can't really give 1/4 of a cow unless you kill it and you cut it open and then you give it, which doesn't really make sense. With gold is known as it's a very soft metal, so you can easily melt it. You can divide it into smaller pieces. You could make it into coins or whatever. Um, of course, with digital money, it's much more easier because you can keep going into the fractions. So, yeah. Um, fungible. What fungible means is it should. So, for example, if you have two sets of money, let's say you have a set of money and I have a set of money. When we exchange those those two sets of money, we both should end up with the same asset again. So if you have 1 gram of gold and if I have 1 gram of gold, when we exchange those two 1 gram of gold, we still have the same 1 gram of gold. So that's what fungibility means. So for example, in notes, if you have a 100 rupee note and I have a 100 rupee note, if we exchange those two, we still have the same value in a way. Nothing should be different in that. So that's what fungibility means. Now, the last property mentioned here is limited supply, which is basically been a contention in different circles. Uh, so yeah, as Vishnu mentioned in one of the lines where he said that you can't expect to use leaves in a forest as money because it's literally available everywhere. So everybody would be rich in a forest if you used leaves as money, right? So one of the things that it should have is it should have a limited supply and it should be rather difficult to to acquire. It shouldn't be very easy to acquire because then you're just increasing the supply of that very item, and anything else valued against that would become either very high value or almost valueless really. So another important uh, aspect that we see of money is that it should be hard to be able to create or get or acquire, and it should be as limited as possible. It shouldn't be available. Yeah, Vishnu, you can go to the next slide.
Yeah. Okay. So on this one,
Yeah.
basically, yeah. So now that you spoke about like all of these properties of money, right? Now, what is currently happened is like in this evolutionary process, of going through different stages. So at one stage, one of the thing that happened is like the need for banking, and as Romit was mentioning, uh, one of the needs arose out of a need for security of sorts, because now if you have like say a bunch of gold with you, and if population is like spread across like a place, and you're living in your house and you have some gold, or you're going in a like a carriage, you're going in a to the market or something like that. Now, there's this possibility that, robbers or raiders or, someone can actually steal this from you because you have so much value on you, right? And there's a like a issue with safety of sorts. And also, as Romit was mentioning, there is also in terms of with the evolution of money, one of the things is about the convenience of sorts, right? Where it's maybe not so convenient to be carrying so much gold with you, right? Now, so the first form of banking was essentially a service provider who is giving you safety. It had nothing to do with governments of sorts. These were like private entities, and it was mostly a trust based system where, okay, hey, I am a very trustworthy entity. Now, so much so that you can actually give me your precious metal, and I will keep it safe from like robbers or like other people who might want to like take it from you. And in return, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to give you these pieces of paper which basically represent the amount of gold that you have actually given me for safekeeping in my vault. Right. Now, one of the things that happened is like with respect to safekeeping of this precious metal, the banker started to realize that hey, as people are giving me their metal and I'm giving them these pieces of paper, like people are quite convenient and people are very happy to exchange these pieces of paper itself amongst each others, right? And they seem to be quite happy doing that, and in the market these papers are actually being exchanged as if it is that gold itself. And now in the legacy system, how the way this would work is the paper that you receive would actually have something like, I promise to pay the bearer like 1 ounce in gold, or I promise to pay the bearer like 1 ounce in silver, or something of that sort. And then like depending on how many like ounces of gold or silver or whatever that you have like deposited in this safekeeping system, and you would receive these pieces of paper. Now, if you take out any piece of paper from your wallet right now and it says like, like if you take out a 2000 rupee note, and if you look at it, actually, if you observed it, and it says that I promise to pay the bearer rupees 2000. If you think about it, this is actually like really absurd. Like, why the hell would they mention that? Because I already have 2000 rupees in my pocket. Now, what is the point of me going to a bank, giving these 2000 rupees, and then getting another? Like, it's kind of meaningless. But this is actually a legacy from the past where these pieces of paper were only promissory notes and their essential value was in what they were promising to give you. Okay. Now, once you understood that, there is a second aspect that needs to be understood, which is the aspect with respect to human greed. Now, what happened is with the banking system, like now, once the banks realized that, hey, suppose I have received 100 units of gold and I have given out like 100 pieces of paper to the general public saying that, hey, okay, like I promise to pay the bearers like an ounce in gold or whatever. Right. Now, what banks started doing at some point is they started issuing more pieces of paper than the gold that they have. Now, the reason for this is like if I've given out 100 pieces of, 100 units of paper for 100 units of gold that I'm having, what the banks realize is that at no point are more than, say, 20, 30 people actually coming to redeem their gold, like bringing in their papers and saying that, hey, give me my gold. So what they realized is that, hey, if I even make like 200 units of paper for the same 100 units of gold that I have, at any given point in time, not more than 60, 70 people are actually going to come, which means I'm still kind of safe. And what I have been able to do is I have been able to give out like 100 units for nothing, basically. And since in the market, these units are, being treated as if they were gold itself. So I'm practically able to get something of like immense value for basically no effort whatsoever. So the moment this realization happens, like you need to understand that this is like a very, very important point in human history, right? And like as we'll be explaining over time, like this is something that is still affecting us very, very deeply as of now. So this realization that, hey, I'm able to create something of immense value for no effort whatsoever, right? So there is a huge incentive for the people who are the custodians of this system to kind of, utilize this for their own benefit of sorts. So, and which is what exactly they started doing, right? So banks around the world would basically start creating more units of paper than the amount of physical metal that they have. Now, the problem with this is that greed tends to overrun its course, like almost always. So what would happen is like soon, like the bankers are creating like way more pieces of paper than the amount of gold that they have in their vaults. And when people in that region, like imagine all these things are happening in a very local territory, it's like it's happening in a small village setup or in a mandal setup or something like that. So when the people realize that, hey, this is what is possibly happening, and when the word goes out in the market that, hey, possibly this bank has created like way more paper than the amount of gold that they have, this triggers an event called the bank run. And quite, because at a historic event, these things would all be like very local events. Like your bank is not sitting somewhere in Zurich or something. Like it would be like a very local entity where you have actually physically gone, put your gold and taken these pieces of paper from them. So it is somewhere within the vicinity of your house, maybe like 10, 20 kilometers, but within that range of your house, of let's say, it's like, so the bank run is quite literally you running to the bank, because like everybody from your village or your town is quite literally running and going to this physical space with your pieces of paper, because you have suddenly realized that there is a possibility that this piece of paper might actually give me nothing of value. Because the whole thing was a trust based system where I could go to the cobbler and get my shoes repaired and give him a piece of paper. But now, on a fine, Wednesday morning, suddenly everyone's on this panic mode and they realize that, oh man, like, everyone's running to the bank. Like I need to like now front run everyone else, because if I'm a bit late to this, I might just be left with a piece of paper that is worth nothing. Right. So this gives rise to this concept called a bank run. Now, this is also something that has happened like many, 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 many times in history, like pretty much with every other banking institution that has existed. Now, as these bank runs kept happening, this gave birth to a concept called central banking. Right. Now, basically, what you need to understand is, as I said, that once a group of people have realized that there is this perverse incentive and this strategy where I'm able to create something of immense value with like very little effort, like this is too good to give up. Like why would you do that, especially if you're someone who's yearning for power? And then to most of you who are listening, like I'm sure you understand that there are like many many entities who are very happy to like grab as much power as possible, right? So to that end, what happens with central banking is it's basically an understanding between a network of banks that, hey, now if I have 100 units of gold and I have given out like 100 pieces of paper, and bank B has like 200 units of gold and they have given out like 200 units of paper, and then bank C has like, say 50 units of gold, and bank D has like, 300 units of gold, and so on and so forth. And there's like 10 of us basically. And now what we're doing is like, now that I have 100 units, and if I give out like, say, 200 units of paper, normally let's say 60 70 people are coming, and now I can actually overextend this where I can give out maybe 400 units of paper. And on a given day, suppose for some reason, like even if 400 people, like all of them have actually come, there's a bank run type situation that is happening. Now, as part of being like a member of this consortium or this group of sorts, or the central banking system, what I'm able to do is like I'm able to call up my buddies and who are like, no, okay, cool, wait, we will send you some gold reserves from our side so that you are able to, you know, give this gold to everyone who's coming to you so that the system doesn't fail. And what we're able to do is like, now where if I was operating as a loan banker, now I had this whole constraint where like for 100 units of gold, maybe if I give out more than 200 300 units of paper, like I might get into trouble. But now that I am part of this network of, criminals of sorts, who are like, I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. Now for 100 units of gold, what I'm able to do is I'm able to connect with or basically give out maybe 500 units of paper quite comfortably without really getting into trouble, right? And again, so once this system is understood, then yeah, basically there is like a huge incentive to continue and perpetuate this system, and then make sure that you're not able to lose control of this. Anything else you would like to add about banking and central banking, Romit?
No, I guess you can continue. There's something I can jump into.
Okay, cool. So then, going forward, like since this system has kind of been happening for quite a while now, so when say the founding fathers of America, like when they were getting independence from, or where they were liberating themselves from the clutches of the British Central Bank. So they quite clearly understood that the kind of power that central banks have over like countries and armies and like all of these things, right? So they had a very conscious decision that we shall never really get into a central banking system, and this was by decision, right, of the founding fathers. Now, what this does is that this has like a bunch of security checks of sorts, which is the first thing is that like if you were to think about the finances of a government as well, they're actually no different from the finances of a household or a company, which is that okay, I have a bunch of income and I have some expenditures, and if my expenditures are more than my income, I'll have to take loans and I get into debt. And if I have my expenditures are lower than my income, I have some surplus. Now, which is where say if there are private competing banks within the country, so as a government, if I'm spending more money than my income, like on public works or whatever, like now I'll have to go to one of these banks and then ask them to lend me some money. And they obviously have the ability to either refuse giving that money to you or increase the interest rate depending on how they perceive your performance, because their incentive is to make sure that the money that they're lending out should come back to them. And if they feel that, oh, this government is actually quite incompetent and there's a possibility that I might actually end up losing all of my wealth, they could actually flat out refuse to give this money to the government. And that way is one of the things that happens is that the government is also kept in check. Like you have finite resources and you have to decide very consciously that okay, what am I going to do with this? Like, am I going to make this road, or am I going to make that bridge, or am I going to like create a dam over here? And I need to like strategize the expenditure of my resources. But one of the things that happened, coming to more modern history, is in 1913, the Federal Reserve of America was created. Now, this has a very interesting backstory. And for that, I would recommend you guys to check out this documentary called The Creature from Jekyll Island. And it talks about the birth of the Federal Reserve, and it's really worth looking into. Probably I will share the link to this also with all of you guys later. Now, when that happened, finally, the Federal Reserve came into existence, and actually, there's nothing really federal about the Federal Reserve. Like it is as federal as Federal Express, actually. So it is a private entity that is controlled by private owners of sorts. And yeah, so once that happened, there has been like this downward spiral with respect to money. So and what the downward spiral was that first somewhere along the way, like the convertibility of dollars to gold was halted for the citizens of America itself, right? Now, this was the first thing that happened. Now, the next thing was that, well, I think it was between World War I and World War II. Like America had basically amassed about 75% of the world's gold reserves, because most of the colonial powers, or it's like they had kind of decimated each other's through war, and America had like sold weapons and like supplies and other things to these guys, and they had basically amassed so much wealth. And so, which is where I think it was in mid 1930s that the Bretton Woods system was agreed upon. And what this was basically an agreement that everyone is basically going to be using dollars for international, currency settlements. And in exchange, America promised to maintain the convertibility of dollars to gold at $35 to an ounce of gold. Right now, what happened through that is that basically the dollar became this reserve currency of the planet, right? And since every other currency is kind of in some fashion linked to dollars, and dollar is like directly linked to gold at $35 to an ounce, so directly or indirectly, every other currency was also pegged to gold in some form, right? Now, this system continued, and since I think it was 1935 when the Bretton Woods Agreement was reached, and since then, now what happened is like one of the things that you need to understand is that warfare is probably one of the most expensive endeavors that any government can engage in. And since then, like the Vietnam War, for example, lasted almost like 19 years, and then there have been like other kind of wars that have been happening in different places. So while the common public in any country might not be concerned about these things, what was happening in the background was that a huge amount of dollars were being created, and some of the countries, who were heads of states of different countries, like they understood that, okay, like the exact same principle that I explained to you with respect to the banking system in the, it's in a town or a village where a bank has created like more pieces of paper than the amount of metal that they have. The same thing is now happening at a global country level. So instead of a village, now we have the world, and instead of a bank, now we have a country, right? So, and now the other people have realized that, okay, these guys have actually created way more pieces of paper than the amount of gold that they possibly have. So a bunch of countries started to repatriate their gold, which is that, hey, I have like say $1 billion in dollar reserves, or I have this much amount of whatever dollars, and please take back your dollars and give me back whatever gold I'm supposed to get for this. Now this was, I think, in 1971, or yeah, when the biggest country to ask for its gold was actually France. And at that time, the president of France was, I think, this person called Charles de Gaulle. And when this happened, and at this time, Richard Nixon was the president of America, and they realized that, okay, if this trajectory continues, where uh, we are basically giving out all of the gold for all the dollars that are existing in all of these international territories, like we are clearly going to run out of gold, because obviously we have created, because they know that they have created like way more pieces of paper than the amount of gold that they have. So in 1971, what happened is like basically, like Richard Nixon announced the halt on the convertibility of dollars to gold, and this event was called the Nixon shock. And since then, and this was obviously, this was supposed to be like a temporary thing, but I'm sure like many of you know that how these so-called temporary things happen with respect to governments whenever they say that yeah, we're going to like temporarily do this, like yeah, this has a way of not being temporary. And yeah, we're in 2022 now, and it's been like more than 5 decades since that, and we have never really gone back to the gold standard of sorts. And since 1971, basically everyone has been decoupled from this asset backed system. And since then, we have come into a form called fiat money, where purely the value of money is by government decree, right? So anything you would like to add, Romit, at this point?
No, carry on. It is good. I think
All right.
it's covered by you.
So now coming to the problems with this fiat money, okay, which is that like if you were originally there in the asset-backed system where gold is money, now gold is a metal that has been created probably in like supernovas, and it's like a natural phenomena, and it is a scarce metal, and like it is there in some mines, and then you have to like mine it out, and then you have to like refine it, and then coin it. And so first of all, it is like scarce, and plus there's a lot of effort that is involved in getting this metal of sorts. Now what happened is, like as soon as we have like decoupled from this, right? So as long as you were there in the gold standard, what would happen is, as technology is progressing, and as you're able to make things easier and easier, what you should notice is a sort of deflation actually. Like if you're able to make a smartphone like manufacturing it is like much easier doing it today than it was like 10 years ago, then probably if 10 years ago a smartphone would have cost you like one gold coin, right now it should have costed you probably one tenth of a gold coin, right? And that is the kind of world that we should have actually been experiencing. But instead, what we have been noticing is there is this inflation of sorts, that even though technology is making things cheaper and cheaper, things are still getting more and more expensive. And the essential reason for this to happen is that there is this constant increase in currency supply, right? Because obviously, if you have to get more gold, there's a lot of effort involved. But if you have to create money out of thin air, and if it is just paper that you're printing on a printing press, right? So there's really no limit to that, right? And now this does a few things that, okay, one which is that like people don't really like money to be taken out of their pocket like very directly. So one of the things that you need to understand is that a government is usually not engaged in the business of creating like value in and of themselves, like say as compared to maybe if you're a farmer, and if you go and like you plow the field and you plant some potatoes, and then you grow that, and then you go to the market and then you sell those things, right? So there's a lot of effort that is involved. You've created something of value, and then you're exchanging this value with other humans. Now, conventionally, the way governments organize themselves is that they collect money in form of taxes, where they go and they say that, hey, pay me this much money for whatever amount of money that you're making. And well, their essential pitch is that if you don't do that, we'll put you in a cage, and we assume you don't like living in cages, so please pay up, right? And that is how they basically collect money in taxes. And then they say that, okay, we're going to use this money for your good. Like we will make roads, and we'll make like public works, and then we'll protect you from like invading armies or things like that, basically, right? But now what happens is like because essentially any system is just a system of other human beings. And like if some people have power over like a large swath of people, like if you are mismanaging your resources, right? Now what would happen is that people receive less benefits and they're still paying more money. And then like as a government you come and you're like, hey, like you were paying me 20% as taxes, I'm going to make it 40%. And at some point I come and I'm going to make it 50%. So at some point people will start to revolt, and they're like, hey, this is like too much. I'm not willing to give up this much of my wealth to you for whatever job that you're promising in exchange for the amount of money that you're taking. Like this is unacceptable to me. Which is where there is a devious path that they take, because this is something that people don't seem to mind, which is that rather than actually directly taking money out of your pocket, what I can do is I can simply print more money, because I have the control over the central bank in a sense. And I'm indirectly taking money out of your pocket, which is that whatever is in your pocket simply gets devalued, because I have just created so many more pieces of paper out of thin air. I did not create the proportionate value. I just created the pieces of paper. It's your job to create the value. I can simply create the paper, and I can now, by creating this paper, I can like create some jobs. I'll make some roads, and I'll buy some weapons, and I will like set up some industry and all of that stuff. And people feel very happy that hey, amazing. It's like these guys are like helping us out. But what is happening is that more and more wealth is being transferred from your pocket to the entity who is creating these pieces of paper, because this paper has nothing connected to the real world of sorts. Now, one of the issues with this is that once you have the ability to create more pieces of paper out of nothing, like while you might start off slow, because again what we're dealing with is human beings, that's it. It's like and that's what these systems are. And whether you look at human interactions with other humans, say 2000 years ago, or 5000 years ago, or 500 years ago, or today, it's essentially the interaction of same principles, which is how does greed interface with other greed, how does fear interface with other fear, right? And so these cycles tend to repeat. Like while we might be under the illusion that somehow we are like some modern society and we are radically different from 1920 or 1750 or something like that, actually there is no difference really. Like if you go back in that time and then if you look at it, they would have been going through like very similar predicaments in their life, because we as creatures have not really radically transformed in the last 200 years. There's nothing really changed, or in the last 1,000 years. So one of the things that happens is that when these entities are able to like create money out of nothing, what they like to do is just create more and more and more money. And what you do with all of this creation is that you tend to normally give it to your own crony buddies first. Like this could be like Wall Street, or this could be like these major corporations which are creating things. And as a central bank, I will say that, oh, I want to create jobs, or make all of these vain promises to people, and that it's like I want to like help the economy, stimulate these things. But essentially what I'm doing is I'm just creating like vast amounts of like paper units, and then I first give it to my buddies, like who are running these giant corporations, either like petrochemicals or fertilizers, or like pharmaceuticals, or the military industrial complex, or things like that. It's like, and as I do that, right, the first people to receive this money actually get the most value out of it, and the last people to receive it actually are just losing all the value that they already have anyways. Because as we were trying to explain from the beginning, that if you think of money as a form of energy exchange and as a store of energy, that, oh, you were growing these potatoes and then you save this energy with yourself. Now someone somewhere is creating all of these units, and the guy who's at the end of the chain, who is just growing these potatoes, that's the guy who gets wiped out, because he's the guy who sold all of these potatoes, and then he's saving like some 10,000 rupees in some format. And now suddenly by the time this percolates and reaches him, now his 10,000 rupees is actually worth maybe like 5,000 rupees or 2,000 rupees. And what hyperinflation is that the velocity of money becomes so high that there is like this switch in public perception, where because this is a whole, basically it's essentially a Ponzi scheme which is just based on a trust model, right? And once that switches, right, uh, when the trust factor changes, then what happens is people reach a state where, rather than trying to hold on to this money, they want to get rid of this money as quickly as possible. Because you have reached a state where maybe if you've received 50,000 rupees at the beginning of the month, right, and say a loaf of bread costs you maybe 50 rupees, by the middle of the month the same loaf of bread is costing you 500 rupees, right? So what has happened is essentially you have lost 90% of the value of the money that you have in terms of real value, right? Be it like bread or utensils or rice or wheat or oil or grains or whatever things it may be. Now, so what you do is, like, as soon as you've received the money, you're going to go to places and you're going to try and get rid of this money as quickly as you can. Either you will get bread or you buy land or anything, because you don't want to hold on to this paper. And when this switch in psychology happens, that is when we kind of enter the territory of hyperinflation. And when that happens, basically people who are holding on to these worthless pieces of paper, they get wiped out. Where you might have spent the last 20 years working hard and accumulating these savings, and then you might have like some 40-50 lakhs in your bank account and feeling like very secure that, okay, my future is safe, I can use this for spending and things like that. What happens is when there is this shift in public perception and the tide turns, and when people are suddenly wanting to get rid of this stuff, while earlier this 50 lakhs could have meant that, okay, I'm able to like comfortably live for the next 10 years, suddenly like 6 months down the line, 8 months down the line, you realize that, oh, for this 50 lakhs I'm not able to like even manage like 3 months of my expenditure, right? And that is what is hyperinflation. And this is also not a very alien concept. This is in fact happened like pretty much to every fiat currency through history. like and this is like a fact that every fiat currency through history has always and always reached its intrinsic value of zero without fail, because eventually people, like, see, people are kind of under this illusion, and as long as they are living under this illusion, this trick continues to work. But as soon as, like, a certain percentage of the population starts to realize that, oh, these pieces of paper that I'm holding on to are actually worth less, this illusion breaks. And as soon as it breaks at a very, very rapid velocity, right? Now, yeah, so the whole thing with respect to the Federal Reserve and the Nixon shock, I've already explained. Yeah. So before we go into the next section, like, do you guys have any questions that we can answer for you?